Hello, Science 14s. Today I'm going to be going through our Chapter 13 study guide. And as you can see with our study guide, as I scroll down, we have a lot of terms again. Hopefully, lots are not too brand new to you, but we do have quite a few. And once I talk through a bunch of them, hopefully it makes a little bit more sense. But please make sure when you're making your study sheet and reviewing your own notes that you're making, please review and add examples that I've talked about, or pause this video, add examples. And if there's anything that's unknown, you can search up as well. Or I'm going to stick pretty closely to this textbook, and then I'll leave you to practice with the assignment. So we're going to start right away at the very top with our key terms. And we're going to talk about populations and individuals. This whole chapter 13 is about populations and the changes in these populations. So, what is a population? Well, this is a group of individuals or an individual species living in an ecosystem. As we can see, individual would be this one type of species. An individual would be you. The human population on the earth is the whole humans grouped together on earth. We could also talk about the population of our school. And so we count the number of individuals in our school and we count them all up. But we're not counting all the other species of organisms. If we were to talk about that, that would be the whole ecosystem, and we're looking at all the populations of the ecosystem. It gets a lot more crazy and diverse than just not focusing in on what one species type. So that's what a population is. It's the focus of one species in an area, and that's what we're going to focus our time with today. So as we put in our key definitions, please make sure you add it as your words. And so don't just always just refer to the dictionary, like I said, come up with a definition that makes sense for you. So it's a number of species in a given area. It could be the human population of the world. It could be the population or the human population of our school or our classroom. They're all different types of populations depending on what area you want. We're going to look at animals and maybe animals in wildlife sanctuaries or things like that. And we're going to practice with it. And so remember, individuals was just a single organism. What we have here is an example right out of the textbook, these burrowing owls, and they're usually in unused gopher holes. They spend summers in Alberta and they go and they fly south into the United States. They're active during the day and they catch insects and mice, and they lay eggs and they burrow for about 4 weeks to hatch their youngs, and then they start hunting. So with these studies, and when we go back through our notes up here, we're going to see there's practice questions about how populations can change. And that's what our whole analysis on this chapter is how do populations actually change? With these practice questions, there's a bunch of practice right here. I'll go through one example, but you need to go back and practice and then think of ideas of why these populations actually change. So practice with these after, and we'll walk through an example right now. So in 1979, ecologists estimated about 2,100 breeding pairs of owls in Canada. By 1987, the population has dropped to 700 pairs. At what rate is the population decreasing? And so it also has this and what to do in our textbook on walking us through stages. So I wrote out in 1979, they had 2,100 owls. In 1987, they had 700. So we're going from 21 down to 700. So, quick, easy way, what is the difference? Subtract the two. For me, I'm going to go the small number, my final number, minusing my original number, and it will equal negative 1,400. This is important because that negative tells me it dropped down 400. And so I was like, oh, okay, makes sense. It dropped down I'm going to highlight it right here, 1,400. If you just went the largest number, subtracting the smallest number, you will still get 1,400 or 1,400. You just have to know that's how many you lost. This negative says it dropped down. Both will be the same answer as long as we know that it decreased. Now, how do we calculate the average? Well, we have how many total it dropped. Well, let's figure out the average. And so that with that, we need to figure out how many years was this study active. And so in 1979, that was year one. They started counting. So we have to count that as a year. So 1979 is one, 1980, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87. So I counted 9 years over that. And so when we go and we have our 9 years, we just want to figure out how many actual owls died every year, or kind of not necessarily died, but were lost every year. And so what we do is we take our negative 1400 or just 1400, divide by 9. That will get us about 155.5 owls a year lost. Perfect. There's our average. About 155 owls a year was lost. Whether they moved or they died or something happened, that's how many dropped a year on average. It could be more, could be less. So that's why we have this 0.5. It's not exact. Now, here's the issue as good environmentalists and ecologists is thinking of reasons why and using our knowledge base. And so this is tough because you have to draw upon what your backgrounds are. So if you were a naturalist, would you be concerned about the burrowing owls? Well, I am. So I would be wondering why they're dropping. Are they just not coming back to the area that I'm estimating? Or are they actually dying off for some reason? Could I think of two factors that play a role in the change of populations? Hopefully, by the end of this chapter or this study guide, we can. And what do you think happened? There is lots and lots of different reasoning. I just need some. And does it kind of make sense? Could I agree with it? Right? There can be lots of answers aside from just two. What do you think? And so that's the troubling part about this unit is a lot of thoughts are what kind of makes sense. So now we move on to population changes. So we practiced with populations. Please go back to your textbook at populations. Now we're going to talk about how populations actually grow and die. And so that's what we see here. When we have our notes, please draw this whole graphic into your notes or your study sheet because it helps organize it of how populations change. On one side, some that add to the total population. On the other side, some that take away from the total population. So simply, things that add to it, a birth rate. Things can be born into that population and they add to the population. Or immigration. Immigration is things that have moved or individuals that have moved into this environment. And so when we talk about a environment or an ecosystem, maybe some new creatures move in and they add to the total. On the other side, if this takes away from the total, if animals or species die, well, that's dropping. If those burrowing owls were dying, well, they're taking away from the total population. However, if they were emigrating and maybe just the owls are going to different locations that are not being recorded, they haven't necessarily died, but they emigrated or they exited out. And that's how I like to think of it is they exited out of this one. So emigration we can think of is they exit the ecosystem. And with this, maybe just those people recording the burrowing owl population didn't know they moved to a different location, but they're counting them as they took away from the total population. On the other hand, this immigration are the ones coming in to the population. So we can kind of use these terms to help remember. Perfect. So now we have some ideas of maybe they exited, maybe they moved in. What happened? So here's the things about population changing. We also want to talk about limiting factors and what stops populations from just growing out of control. Because some populations, as we can see here, maybe we're talking about a river or a lake and how things are moving around as we go through these examples. What causes these factors to be held in check and not just have these fish explode in population and overrun us? Hopefully, we can think of a few reasons that cause it. Because with this one, we have some good and some bad. Here you can see growth on some organisms where they start off very, very low, and over time they start to pick up, pick up, pick up, and they start to go very, very fast, and the number of organisms starts growing very, very fast. It's like if you go 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, and 8 times 2 is 60, and we're going faster, faster. This was the worry about the pandemic is if this virus spread uncontrollably because there's nothing to limit its growth. This is what we were hoping to happen with COVID and this pandemic and this growth of the bacteria is that it will grow fast, 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 but then it will hit a carrying capacity. Something will stop it, whether it'll be more people are immune to it, or we discover a vaccine or have some kind of natural defense. Something stops it from growing out of control. Same thing can be seen with all these organisms, whether it's mosquito populations that we start to see popping up now. They'll go explode and then they'll cap out and then they'll fall back off. There's something limiting this growth, and we're going to learn about these limiting factors. There's two different types. Abiotic, hopefully we remember that term. This means non-living. We got that from our biology. And then we have biotic, and we remember that one is bio, just like that. It is living factors. So abiotic, not living, biotic, living. And so we are going to talk about some of the things that limit growth, whether it's non-living or living things. So some things, like water, definitely limits the growth. If there's not a lot of standing water, mosquitoes can't live. If there's no matter or no food for mosquitoes, they can't live. If the weather's really, really bad and as they're about to hatch, it got really cold and they all froze off and died, well, that limits mosquito growth. However, if it's nice and wet and sunny, or like it is right now outside, and there's lots of standing water, the weather's warm, and there's lots of food because everyone's going outside and all the animals are outside, oh, well, mosquitoes are going to have a boom in their population. Biotic factors are things like competition. And so between other species, whether we're fighting for the same resources, we're fighting for the same water, there's a battle between species of, oh, I need food, I need water, I need this location to live. There's competition. There's parasites and hosts. So a parasite is something that lives in something or off of something. And so we have parasites that can live inside of organisms. We have parasites that just grow off of them. So like with trees, they get a mold or they get fungus that can kill them, and they don't have a defense against some funguses, let's say. And so it kills them, and the tree eventually dies. And so that limits tree growth. Predator prey. So, well, some animals need to hunt to eat, so they're going to be the predator. The prey gets hunted, unfortunately, and there's lots of examples. So that is a living factor or a biotic factor. And then reproduction rates. When we think about flies or mosquitoes, why don't they just boom even faster? They lay thousands and thousands of eggs. Well, luckily, there's birds that slow that down and they use their larvae or the little eggs as a food source. So the reproduction rates are slowed down. Or as you kind of see with larger and larger organisms, their reproduction rates are longer and longer, so they can't replicate as fast. Finally, there is the human impact, and there is lots and lots of talk in the social medias, news items about the human impact on environment. I'm going to focus on just these three about how we change the population. So we're going to focus on exotic species like humans They bring in these new exotic species that would normally never be in an area, and they do surprisingly well because there is no competition, there is no predator prey, there is no parasites that attack them, so there's nothing that limits them. So humans can bring in exotic species and it can be very, very dangerous. Humans also use pesticides and they use biological controls when we're farming or when we're controlling our food sources for like when we raise cattle and sheep and pigs. We're using these controls and we're using fertilizers and pesticides and we're adding chemicals to the environment that stop other populations from growing and that sets them all out of balance. So that can be a very dangerous issue itself. So please make sure when you're going through the notes, reviewing these terms, watching through my video, but really understanding some of the impacts as well. And I went through them quickly. I talked about what the terms are. I gave a few examples. Make sure you can pull upon what are some of these impacts that these different things have and what limits these growths, in fact, all these different factors. Like I said, practicing questions is huge. And so as we go down, here, when we start to do our review, it is very important that we practice with some of these populations, but talk about critical thinking like these ground squirrels. What happens with their populations and what happens and what causes something? Come up with an idea because, well, it can be right. There is many answers and sometimes we don't have a definitive answer. So come up with a potential answer that might happen. Like always, practice the assignment, making sure you're practicing any questions, and then please message me if you have any other questions. Take care and good luck on your quiz that's opening tomorrow, Friday, May 29th, and it'll be open till Monday, June 1st. Good luck and happy studying, everyone.